Hidden behind the quiet, tree-lined streets of Holmby Hills once stood a mansion unlike any other in Los Angeles, not because it was the largest or the most expensive, but because it belonged to a man who built worlds. Walt Disney, at the height of his power in the late 1940s, was already a name stitched into American imagination. Yet even as millions adored the cheerful worlds he crafted, Walt himself was searching for something far more elusive: privacy, refuge, and a place where he could retreat from the demands of a rapidly expanding empire. By the end of the decade, Walt's life had changed dramatically. The studio had grown from a small animation shop into a sprawling creative powerhouse. Films like Snow White, Bambi, and Fantasia had become landmarks, and Disneyland was already a dream beating louder inside his mind. But success had its price. His schedule was relentless, his creative ambitions were heavier than ever, and the public's fascination with him, the man behind the mouse, only intensified. Walt and his wife, Lillian, had spent years in their previous home in Los Feliz, raising their daughters and building the life they had dreamed of in their youth. But by 1949, that house no longer felt big enough. Not for the family, not for Walt's restless imagination, not for the quiet he increasingly craved. Hemmed in by city streets and traffic, the old residence felt too small, too close, too exposed. So Walt began to look west, toward the hills, toward a new beginning. Holmby Hills was quiet, exclusive, wrapped with manicured lawns and hidden estates. To many Hollywood elites, it was simply a neighborhood of wealth. But for Walt, it promised space, freedom, a chance to build something deeply personal, and he found it on Carolwood Drive, a parcel of land lined with towering trees and natural privacy, set far back from the street, almost begging to be transformed. It was a blank canvas, waiting for an artist who was never satisfied with what already existed. This was where Walt Disney decided to build the estate that would shape his final years. A home filled with magic, creativity, ambition, and shadows he never expected to face. When Walt and Lillian first walked the grounds of the Carolwood property, it didn't feel like a mansion, not yet. It felt like a possibility, quiet, green, and untouched. Unlike the more ostentatious estates nearby, this one was tucked away, shielded by hedges and old-growth trees that muffled the noise of the city. It offered what Walt valued more than luxury: seclusion, a place where he could think, create, and simply exist without a spotlight. For Lillian, the appeal was different, but just as strong. Their daughters, Diane and Sharon, were growing fast. She wanted a home where they could live safely and comfortably, somewhere with more room to explore, play, and escape the constant attention that came with being Disney children. Holmby Hills was prestigious, yes, but more importantly, it was quiet. It was the kind of neighborhood where neighbors waved politely and minded their own business. That mattered. Walt saw something deeper. By 1950, he was juggling multiple worlds at once: animated films, live-action productions, ambitious new technologies, and the early blueprint of Disneyland. His creative appetite was endless, but his energy was not. He needed a sanctuary where ideas could expand without interruption, where he could retreat after long days at the studio and still feed the restless curiosity that drove him. The existing house on the property wasn't particularly grand. It was stately and traditional, but modest by Hollywood standards. Yet Walt wasn't looking for grandeur. He was looking for potential. The architecture offered enough structure to build upon, enough openness to customize, and enough distance from neighbors to ensure privacy. The home could become whatever his mind imagined, and that more than anything convinced him. For the first time in years, he could picture a life that wasn't measured in production schedules or studio crises. A life where family dinners weren't rushed, where weekends weren't interrupted by business calls, where he could sit on a porch and listen to the wind through the trees instead of traffic or studio alarms. Walt and Lillian didn't choose Carolwood for its prestige. They chose it because it felt like a retreat, a return to simplicity, the rare kind of place where a man known for creating fantasy could finally breathe in reality. Once Walt Disney secured the Carolwood Drive property, the real work began. The home, though charming, was just a canvas for the vision he carried in his mind. Unlike the polished, immaculate estates of his neighbors, Walt approached his mansion as a living experiment, a playground for creativity and imagination. Every corner of the house and yard became an opportunity to merge practicality with personal whimsy, a balance that few could achieve. The gardens were first. Walt loved old trains, and he dreamed of creating a backyard railroad that would carry both children and imagination across the estate. Tracks were laid meticulously, miniature stations constructed, tunnels carved through hills, and bridges painted with care. This was more than a hobby. It was a symbol of control and creativity in a life often dictated by deadlines, studio executives, and public expectation. The Carolwood Pacific Railroad, as it came to be known, was both a private delight and a technical marvel. Fully operational, fully engineered, and entirely unique. Inside the home, Walt made modifications with equal attention to detail. Rooms were expanded or repurposed to serve dual functions. Private offices doubled as miniature studios where sketches, storyboards, and prototype ideas came to life. Lillian oversaw the more domestic spaces, ensuring that family life remained grounded amidst the chaos of creativity. Bedrooms were personalized, dining spaces flexible for gatherings, and the kitchen adapted for both ordinary meals and special studio events. Every structural choice reflected a careful negotiation between comfort, family needs, and Walt's larger ambitions. Yet the transformation wasn't only about function, it was also about charm. Architectural features borrowed from European country homes, soft wood finishes, warm lighting, and playful motifs created a storybook atmosphere. The mansion was a stage, carefully set to inspire anyone who walked through its doors. Even the smallest details, a carved railing here, a hidden nook there, carried a sense of discovery, a subtle invitation to dream. By the mid-1950s, the Carolwood Drive mansion was no longer just a house. It had become a private laboratory of life, a space where Disney could both escape and experiment, where family and fantasy coexisted in delicate tension. But as the estate grew in character and complexity, so too did the weight of expectation and responsibility, an undercurrent that would quietly shape the coming years. Life inside Walt Disney's Carolwood Drive mansion was a careful blend of family warmth, creative frenzy, and structured routine. At first glance, the house radiated domestic charm. Lillian Disney ensured that the home felt like a haven, filled with laughter, music, and the aroma of home-cooked meals. Their daughters, Diane and Sharon, roamed freely across the grounds, exploring the gardens, climbing trees, and occasionally peeking at the miniature trains that chugged along the tracks. Yet beneath the storybook surface, there was an undercurrent of disciplined energy. Walt treated the estate as a working studio in miniature. His private office, tucked into one wing, was constantly occupied with sketches, storyboards, and detailed plans for animation and theme park projects. Walls that might have held portraits or paintings instead displayed blueprints and inspirational notes. Walt was meticulous, reviewing every line, every color, and every idea as if the house itself were an extension of the studio he built in Burbank. Meals were both a family ritual and a moment of negotiation. Breakfast was early, a time to review schedules and discuss the day ahead. Lunch and dinner often included guests, animators, engineers, or studio executives, who found themselves quietly impressed by how seamlessly the mansion blended personal life with professional oversight. Lillian orchestrated the household with precision, managing staff, ensuring meals ran on time, and keeping a calm rhythm that Walt's intense energy could otherwise disrupt. The Carolwood Pacific Railroad remained the crown jewel of daily life. On weekends, Walt could be found donning his conductor's hat, guiding his miniature train along winding tracks, inviting friends and family aboard. The whistle, the tiny stations, even the signal lights were more than mere entertainment. They were a tangible manifestation of Disney's vision, a private world where imagination held sway over reality. Evenings, however, often carried a quieter tension. Walt's mind rarely rested. He revisited the day's work, considered new ideas, and sometimes grappled with the pressures of running a growing entertainment empire. The mansion, while magical, was also a crucible where ambition, stress, and family life intersected. Lillian and the children witnessed both the brilliance and the burdens, understanding that this home was both sanctuary and stage, a place where Disney's genius lived alongside his unspoken struggles. Beneath the storybook charm of Carolwood Drive, Walt Disney's mansion became a stage for mounting pressures. By the late 1940s and early 1950s, Walt's life had become a constant balancing act between family, studio responsibilities, and the ever-growing demands of public expectation. The home, once a private retreat, could no longer shield him entirely from the weight of his ambitions. Walt's health was an unspoken concern. He suffered from chronic stress, long hours, and a relentless drive for perfection that often left him exhausted by evening. Staff would find him wandering the grounds late at night, sketchbook in hand, studying train layouts or pondering new animation sequences. The backyard railroad, initially a joyful diversion, gradually became a symbol of his obsessive need to control every detail, not just on tracks and wheels, but in every corner of his life. Internal tensions also began to surface. While Lillian remained a stabilizing force, Walt's single-minded focus sometimes created friction with the household staff. His creative vision clashed with the practicalities of running a home, and small disagreements could escalate into subtle stress points. Even within the family, the mansion's walls echoed the quiet intensity of Walt's ambitions. Diane and Sharon often observed their father's mood shifting from playful and imaginative to stern and contemplative in a matter of minutes, a reflection of the constant mental juggling he performed. Outside, pressures compounded the strain. The studio faced financial challenges and increasing public scrutiny as Walt's reputation grew. Investors, critics, and media attention followed him home. Letters, memos, and calls often interrupted what should have been private family time. The very mansion that once offered solace now served as both sanctuary and spotlight, where Walt could retreat but never fully escape the looming responsibilities he had shouldered for decades. Evenings, once filled with laughter and train rides, sometimes ended in solitude. Walt would sit in his study, quietly working, while the family relaxed elsewhere. The magic of Carolwood Drive was tinged with the reality of relentless ambition, a place where dreams were built, but where the pressure to achieve and innovate never left him. The mansion, so carefully curated as a haven of creativity, began reflecting the duality of its owner. A home of wonder shadowed by the burdens of a man whose imagination had become both his gift and his weight. By the mid-1950s, Carolwood Drive had become more than just a home. It was a reflection of Walt Disney's complex inner world. The mansion, with its warm storybook charm and elaborate backyard railroad, held the memories of countless creative triumphs, late-night sketches, and whispered family moments. Yet it was also a place where the pressures of his empire began to weigh heavily. Walt's health started to decline during this period. Smoking, long hours, and a constant drive to innovate took their toll. Even in the comfort of his private sanctuary, he could not escape the creeping fatigue, the persistent coughs, and the moments when the burdens of leadership and personal expectation collided. Lillian, ever supportive, noticed the subtle changes in his demeanor, pauses in conversation, nights spent awake planning layouts or studying storyboards, and an increasing intensity when walking the property or inspecting the railroad. The backyard railroad, once a source of joy, also mirrored this tension. Tracks meticulously laid, miniature trains running with precise timing, became an obsession. It was more than a hobby. It was a metaphor for control, order, and the desire to make the world around him function exactly as envisioned. Family dinners, laughter, and playtime with Diane and Sharon often coexisted with a quiet, unspoken seriousness. The mansion, a space where dreams and duty overlapped. Friends and studio colleagues recall Walt retreating into his study, sketching late into the night while the family relaxed elsewhere. The lines between home and workplace blurred. Carolwood Drive, for all its charm, became a microcosm of Walt's life, a place of imagination shadowed by expectation, creativity intertwined with the relentless drive to achieve. Despite the pressures, the mansion remained a hub of inspiration. Ideas for Disneyland, film projects, and technological innovations often sprang from these quiet corridors and lush gardens. Walt continued to host gatherings for collaborators, share sketches, and test designs, always with an eye toward perfection. Yet beneath the surface, the house carried an unspoken melancholy. The walls had seen joy and creativity, but also stress, exhaustion, and a subtle foreboding that Walt's time here was finite. Carolwood Drive was both a sanctuary and a silent witness to the man behind the magic, a home that held the weight of imagination alongside the quiet struggle of a life spent building dreams for the world. After Walt Disney's passing in 1966, Carolwood Drive's story entered a quieter, more reflective phase. The mansion, once alive with creativity, ambition, and laughter, fell into a space defined by memory rather than activity. Lillian Disney and the family faced the daunting task of preserving both the physical estate and the intangible legacy it represented. The home had been more than bricks and timber. It was a vessel for Walt's imagination, his private world where childhood wonder and adult responsibility intertwined. The neighborhood watched closely as the once bustling estate shifted. Friends and collaborators recalled the lingering presence of Walt even after his death. Sketches still pinned in the study, miniature trains left in mid-run, the garden paths worn by decades of imaginative exploration. The mansion was both a memorial and a reminder that the man who had redefined entertainment and family storytelling had built a world that could outlive him, even in private spaces. However, the estate faced practical pressures. Holmby Hills, always a neighborhood of prestige, was changing. Property values surged, and the sprawling plot of Carolwood Drive became a target for developers and collectors alike. The Disney family had to decide how to honor the memory of the home while balancing financial and logistical realities. Lillian Disney chose careful stewardship, preserving key elements of the mansion, but the property could not remain a personal shrine forever. The backyard railroad, perhaps the most symbolic feature, was dismantled, its pieces relocated or preserved by enthusiasts and museums. The magic of Walt's miniature locomotives could not survive in situ, yet the tracks, the roundhouse, and the locomotive itself became emblems of a man whose joy in creation had been literalized in every corner of the estate. The rooms, once vibrant with sketches and storyboards, became empty shells, beautiful, historic, but frozen in time. Carolwood Drive also came to represent the duality of Walt's life, the thrill of innovation and the private weight of his ambitions. To those who visited or studied the estate, the mansion remained an object lesson in the balance between genius and obsession, inspiration and isolation. The home's atmosphere, though quieter, continued to whisper stories of late-night creativity, meticulous attention to detail, and the gentle melancholy of a world that had outpaced its master. In many ways, the estate's quiet years after Walt's death emphasized the personal cost of his brilliance. A man who built a universe for millions yet carried private struggles within walls few ever saw. Carolwood Drive endured, not just as a house, but as a testament to the complex life of the man behind the magic. Today, Carolwood Drive's legacy exists in layers. As a physical place, a symbol of Walt Disney's vision, and a touchstone for understanding the private life of a public icon. Though the mansion itself no longer stands as it once did, its influence stretches far beyond its walls. Every detail, the hand-laid tracks of the backyard railroad, the carefully crafted interiors, the creative nooks and private studios, continues to echo the mindset of a man obsessed with storytelling and perfection. The estate's greatest legacy may not be in architecture or property value, but in the example it set for immersive creativity. Walt's insistence on blending work with play, engineering with imagination, and personal curiosity with professional ambition defined how he approached not just film, but an entire culture of entertainment. Those who study Carolwood Drive see it as a laboratory of innovation, a place where ideas could be tested in miniature before being scaled to theme parks, films, or international enterprises. The tracks Walt built and the trains that circled them were more than a hobby. They were an exercise in design, engineering, and narrative, a tangible rehearsal for the worlds he dreamed of sharing with millions. Yet the mansion's story also carries caution. Behind the whimsical facades and intricate details lay the pressures Walt faced. The relentless pursuit of perfection, the constant balancing of family and empire, and the private health struggles that eventually limited his time in the home he loved. Carolwood Drive reminds us that brilliance often coexists with strain, and that even the happiest of places can contain shadows. For historians and fans, the mansion offers a rare glimpse into the tensions between personal desire and public expectation, a duality that shaped Walt's life until its end. The home also influenced how future generations view the relationship between creator and creation. Disney's meticulous attention to detail, his willingness to live inside his imagination, and his dedication to shaping environments both big and small are lessons carried forward in museums, archives, and biographies. Carolwood Drive remains a reference point, a private sanctuary where a cultural titan allowed himself to experiment, fail, and delight in the small victories. Though the mansion may be gone, its essence lingers. The stories of late-night sketches, miniature trains, and private reflections on the lawn persist as a reminder that behind the global empire lay a man who dreamed, who labored, and who sought solace in a home that was as much a personal universe as it was a stage for wonder. Carolwood Drive endures, not in brick and mortar alone, but in the imagination it nurtured, a testament to Walt Disney's enduring magic, his burdens, and the home that held them both.